It took exactly 3 seconds for everything in my life to fall apart. 1. The conference room door burst open, slamming hard against the wall, the sound echoing through the quiet space. Two 12 heads snapped around at once, staring at the man who had just entered. 3. His finger pointed straight at me, and his voice sliced through the air, cold as steel. Another one of the silent ones. I don't even remember if I breathed in that moment. All I remember is the steam still rising from my coffee cup, and the words on the page blurring into each other. The room suddenly felt smaller, heavier, like every ounce of oxygen had been sucked out of it. 12 of us sat around a long glass table, the so called elite of NovaCore Technologies, members of Task Force Orion, a group that the CEO often praised to the press as the company's crown jewel. Now, under his glare, we all looked like suspects. Charles Vance, CEO of NovaCore, was a tall man with a sharp face, bright eyes, and a voice that moved slowly enough to make anyone nervous. Standing in front of the giant projection screen, he pointed at the red number blazing across it, $2,348,921, gone from the Research and Development Fund. Someone in this room, he said, his voice steady and loud, has stolen money from my company. No one moved. I glanced around. Riley, the data analyst who always smiled, was frozen silent. Aisha, our brilliant and icy legal advisor, stared down at the table. Noah, head of Orion, sat upright, hands clasped together, expression unreadable. I was at the far end of the table, near the window. Morning light from Seattle filtered through the glass, brushing across everyone's faces in pale gray streaks, like an old black and white film. Charles began circling the table. The sound of his polished shoes struck the floor in slow, deliberate rhythm, each step pressing deeper into the silence. When he stopped behind me, I could hear my own breathing, quick, shallow, uneven. Evelyn Ward, he said without looking at me. You're in charge of all audit operations for the Orion project, aren't you? Yes, sir, I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Then explain this. I looked up at the screen, those familiar figures I'd reviewed for months, balance sheets, project codes, minor transactions aligned in a pattern that once made perfect sense. Now, they stood against me. I need to review the data, I said. There could be an error in the system or... He cut me off, lowering his voice but sharpening it like a blade. There are no errors. Our systems are triple-checked by independent auditors. The only flaw here is human. He turned to face me, and usually, the quiet, diligent ones, the ones who think they're smarter than everyone else, are the ones hiding the biggest secrets. The words hit like a blow to the chest. I felt the blood drain from my face. Every eye in the room turned toward me like 1,000 needles. Aisha avoided my gaze. Riley stared down. Noah's expression hovered somewhere between pity and detachment. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but the words caught in my throat. Explanations meant nothing in a room where power had already chosen its scapegoat. Charles ended the meeting with a single sentence. Task Force Orion is suspended until I have answers. If NovaCore's reputation suffers, I won't hesitate to sacrifice anyone. The door closed behind him. People stood slowly, moving in silence. I stayed seated, gripping the folder in my hands that so tightly the paper cut through my skin. Noah came over, resting a hand on my shoulder. His tone was calm but hollow. Stay calm, Evelyn. The truth will come out. I looked at him, unsure if he believed that or was already stepping off a sinking ship. He walked away after Charles, footsteps fading without a glance back. I gathered my papers and headed for the door. Just before it closed, I caught Charles's low voice in the hallway. He was speaking to Patrick Moore, the company's chief financial officer. Make sure that the story hits the press before morning. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't discovery. It was orchestration, a performance, and I had just been cast as the villain. Out in the hallway, the fluorescent lights reflected off the glass walls, turning everything sterile and cold. I stopped by the window. From the 27th floor, Seattle stretched below in the rain, wet streets, and headlights streaking through the gray. Just minutes ago, I'd been the most trusted person on the team. Now I was the accused, the tainted, the one about to lose everything. Back in my office, I sat in front of my still lit screen. Lines of data filled it, silent, precise, and far more honest than the people I'd just left. I stared at them and thought of my father. 7 years ago, he'd been an accountant too, an honest man who dared to expose corruption above him. They fired him, branded him a troublemaker, and within a year, he lost his job, his reputation, and his faith in the world. I still remember the night he died, his desk covered with invoices and a worn notebook bearing his final line. Truth doesn't need defenders, only someone willing to hold it. I chose this career because of him. I wanted to prove integrity still mattered. And now I stood exactly where he once stood, facing a system that cloaked power in the language of ethics. I shut down my computer, gathered my files, and locked my door. The hallway was empty. I paused before the glass wall, seeing my own reflection, tired but unbroken. If they thought I'd stay silent, they picked the wrong woman. News spread faster than I expected. In less than 24 hours, the headline, Team Orion Embezzled, more than $2.3 million at NovaCore appeared across every internal bulletin. There was no concrete evidence published, only lines saying insider sources revealed it, but that was enough. In the corporate world, rumors travel faster than the truth. That morning, I walked into headquarters under strange stares. Some people avoided my eyes, others whispered as I passed. At the reception desk, the security guard who always greeted me with a familiar smile nodded curtly. I understood then I carried an invisible red mark on my forehead. When I swiped my badge, the system gave a dry beep and showed access restricted. I tried again, same result. My access had been locked. The office was empty, and my teammates' chairs were too. Only the hum of the air conditioning and the smell of cold coffee remained. Team Orion, the 12 of us, had been suspended pending investigation. On the desk, I found a thick white envelope, a suspension notice signed by Charles Vance. Something squeezed my chest. I sat down and opened my personal laptop to check data, but even my backup system was disabled. Files had been wiped, leaving a strange message on the screen. Unauthorized access detected, admin lock. Someone had even breached my personal internal account. While I tried to recover things, my phone rang. It was Riley Shaw, our data specialist. His voice was small, shaky, hurried. "Evelyn," he said, "do not come to the office. They are searching everyone's computers. Charles wants to see who cooperates. Noah is working directly with Patrick." I was silent for a few seconds and then asked, "Do you trust me, Riley?" A pause. "I want to," he said, "but I do not want to lose my job." That answer turned everything off. I knew fear made people keep quiet. I did not blame Riley. I had seen this before with my father, with his colleagues, when they turned away to save themselves. By noon, I received an email from Human Resources asking me to cooperate with the investigation and not to access any internal documents during suspension. The last line chilled me. Any action contrary to this policy will be considered an obstruction of the investigation. I read it again. They did not only want me silent, they wanted me paralyzed. That afternoon, I met Aisha Patel at the cafe near the building. She arrived late, tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "I have reviewed the legal paperwork for this case," she said quietly. "There is no formal investigation order, no independent audit request from a third party. That means everything is in Charles's hands." "He is fabricating a case," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Aisha nodded. "I think so. And he has Patrick, who runs the entire financial system." We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the rain began, droplets pooling on the window pane like tiny shards of a broken world. "I will not sit still," I said. "I will find evidence." Aisha looked at me for a long moment. "Evelyn," she said, "do you know who you are up against? Charles is not ordinary. He has a team of lawyers and a board ready to believe him over a suspended employee." "I know," I replied, "but if I stay quiet, he wins forever." Aisha said nothing more, only a small nod. I saw something in her eye, not exactly trust, but respect. By the time I got home, it was dark. Streetlights painted the window panes. I opened my personal laptop, and this time I could not get in at all. A window popped up on the black screen. Stop digging. You are next. My heart raced. For a moment, I heard a faint sound in the hallway, footsteps pacing, then stopped outside my door. I held my breath. After a few seconds, the steps moved on. I shut the laptop, locked the door, and sat on the floor. The room was pitch black except for the pale light from my phone on my face. I opened contacts and paused on my father's number. Though he had been gone for years, I did not call, I only looked. Part of me wanted to cry, another part colder than ever. They thought I would be afraid. They thought I would give up. But when someone has already lost everything, fear has nowhere to hold. I opened my notebook and wrote the first line since the suspension. Day 2. My accounts are locked, data erased, threats made, but if they are covering something up, I will find it. I set down the pen and listened to the rain grow heavier. From that moment, I knew this was no longer just a job. It was a fight between power and the truth, and I, alone or not, would start it. On the third day after that meeting, I returned to NovaCore headquarters. No one had officially banned me from entering the building. They had only revoked my access rights, but my employee badge still worked. Maybe they thought I wouldn't dare show my face again, that I'd hide away in fear. They were wrong. The air in the office was thick, metallic. People spoke more softly than usual, avoiding my gaze. I felt like a ghost wandering through what used to be my second home. I found Noah in a small conference room on the 17th floor. He was hunched over his laptop, so focused he didn't notice me until I spoke. Noah, we need to talk. He looked up, startled, then quickly composed himself. Evelyn, you shouldn't be here. They could accuse you of obstructing the investigation. I have nothing left to lose, I said, taking the seat across from him. I know you submitted the report blaming me. His expression tightened. I did it for the team. Charles wanted someone held accountable, at least temporarily. If not, the entire project would have been shut down. You sacrificed me to save yourself. Noah sighed, offering no denial. He had the kind of face people instinctively trusted, sharp, calm, steady. But I had heard too many steady voices hide cowardice behind composure. You don't understand how this world works, Evelyn, he said quietly. Sometimes silence is the only way to survive. I looked straight at him. I do understand. And I also know some people stay silent because they're afraid, while others speak up because they simply can't bear it anymore. The air between us grew heavy. Noah held my gaze, then closed his laptop. I'm just telling you not to destroy yourself. Charles has everything: media, the board, and Patrick. You can't win. I didn't answer. He left, his familiar cologne lingering in the room like an afterthought. When the door clicked shut, I opened my personal laptop and accessed the private backup system I had built years ago, a habit from my early career. What I found made my stomach twist. The metadata in the financial transaction files had been altered, and the timestamp was from after my suspension. Someone was still entering the system using my credentials. I leaned back in my chair, the realization hitting me hard. It all fits. Charles had accused me of creating a legal excuse to wipe the real trail clean. That afternoon, I met Aisha at a small cafe near Lake Union. It was raining lightly, drops tapping against the glass roof. I need your help, I said as soon as she sat down. The company's financial system was tampered with. There's an admin login recorded after my access was revoked. Aisha frowned. Are you sure? Only 3 people have admin rights: Charles, Patrick, and me. Before they took it away, I interrupted. Now there are only 2. She went silent for a few seconds. If that's true, then they're not just trying to frame you, they're trying to bury the entire thing. I nodded. I need to access the system logs. The traces won't be completely gone. Aisha leaned closer, lowering her voice. I can help. The legal department still has temporary clearance. I'll send you last month's access file before they change the passwords. I stared at her, surprised by the risk she was taking. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said with a faint, tired smile. I just can't stand watching someone build a lie while everyone else stays quiet. That night, I got home late. The apartment was dark, the silence broken only by the rain outside my window. I opened my laptop, entered the access code Aisha had sent, and waited. The screen flickered, then filled with a stream of running commands. Halfway down the list, I froze. A data adjustment command had been executed at 2 in the morning, under the account admin 1. The IP was traced back to Singapore. I checked the employee records. Only one person had worked in Singapore that month: Patrick Moore, Chief Financial Officer. My heart raced. Patrick never moved without Charles's approval. I opened my notebook and wrote quickly: Day 3, admin access detected. IP, Singapore. Possible link to Patrick Moore. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "You're going too far, Evelyn." I stared at the words, a chill creeping up my spine. I stood and looked out the window. On the street below, a black car sat parked at the curb, headlights off. I couldn't see who was inside, only the faint glow of a cigarette. I pulled the curtain shut and sat back down. My hands were shaking, but my mind had never been clearer. If they were watching me, it meant I was close. I barely slept that night. I combed through every file, every backup. Near dawn, I found a data fragment that didn't align with any legitimate accounting process. In its metadata was a single note: approved by C. Vance. I stared at the screen, motionless. There was no doubt now. Charles Vance, the CEO himself, had authorized it. I opened my voice recorder and whispered, "If anything happens to me, check NovaCore's system logs. Everything is there." Then I turned it off and leaned my head against the wall. Outside, the rain had stopped. In that fragile silence, I finally understood. This was no longer a battle between me and him. It was a war between truth and the man trying to kill it. The next morning, I arrived at the office before dawn. No one knew I was coming back. NovaCore Tower was still dark. The faint glow of the security lights reflected on the marble floor. I wore a long coat and a baseball cap, looking like a stranger in the place I once called home. I wasn't there to hide. I was there to find the truth. Inside the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, drawn, but with something new in my eyes: resolve. When the doors opened, the 17th floor was silent. I plugged the USB drive with Aisha's access code into a side port and pulled up the security console. The screen filled with hundreds of data logs scrolling fast, each line a trace, a heartbeat of the company. I went through every record, every hour, every click. Then I saw it. A login at 2:03 in the morning, the IP traced to Singapore, under the account admin 1. I opened the details: a financial adjustment to a project labeled Project Theta. In the approval column, a short note appeared: approved by C. Vance. My heart pounded. Charles Vance. He didn't just know about the missing money, he had signed off on it. I took screenshots, saved everything, then made 3 copies: one on an external drive, one in an anonymous cloud folder, and one sent through an encrypted email to the private inbox only Aisha knew about. Suddenly, the door opened. I flinched. It was Riley. He stood there for a few seconds, silent, then quietly closed the door behind him. "You're still digging, huh?" I nodded. Riley looked around, lowering his voice. "I found something." He pulled a small memory card from his pocket. "I found this on the secondary server, the one that stores temporary logs. 17 transaction files are marked hidden. I haven't opened them yet." I took it from him, my hands trembling slightly. "Do you trust me?" Riley nodded. "I don't know who's lying, but I know it's not you." I plugged the card in. The files appeared: 17 microtransactions, each only a few $1,000s, but together they added up almost exactly to $2,300,000. The recipient, Cipher Edge Limited, a shell company in Singapore. I checked the internal partner list. Cipher Edge wasn't on it. "Patrick Moore," I whispered. "He used to handle international investments." Riley frowned. "You think the chief financial officer is involved?" "I don't think," I said. "I know. I saved everything and disconnected." Riley glanced toward the door, his voice barely above a whisper. "Have you heard from Noah? They said Charles met him privately this morning." "No," I said, though my chest tightened. That night, I called Aisha and told her everything. She was silent for a few seconds before replying. We have to be careful. If you have evidence against both the CEO and the CFO, you're touching something they'll destroy people to protect. I can't stop now. I'm not telling you to stop, Aisha said firmly. I'll help, but we need proof they can't erase. After the call, I reopened the system logs. A new line had appeared automatically, time-stamped minutes earlier. Access request denied. User, Noah Grant. Noah had tried to get in, but his permissions were gone. Who revoked them? I noted it down, wondering whether Noah was trying to delete evidence or uncover the same truth I was chasing. Near midnight, I heard a car pull up outside. I looked through the blinds. The same black sedan as before. The door opened, a dim light catching the face of a man standing on the sidewalk. Patrick Moore. He looked up toward my floor, then turned away. I understood his message. A warning didn't need words. I turned on my recorder, my voice calm, almost steady. If anything happens to me, the evidence is stored on a hard drive labeled Orion Archive. It's kept off-site. I stopped recording and looked around my silent apartment. In the window's reflection, I saw myself, tired, afraid, but no longer the woman who had sat quietly in that conference room. They could follow me, lock my accounts, turn everyone against me, but they couldn't erase what I had seen. That night, I didn't sleep. I knew I was entering the most dangerous stage, where even the smallest mistake could make me disappear, just like the missing money. But I also knew this: the truth was out now, faint but undeniable. And once light appears, no one can ever make it vanish completely. 3 days after I uncovered the hidden transactions, NovaCore descended into chaos. Unofficial whispers about an expanded investigation spread across every hallway. Clusters of employees murmured behind half-closed doors, while middle managers suddenly became busier than ever, their eyes avoiding one another. I kept silent, showing up at the office as if I'd never been suspended. But this time, the stares that followed me weren't just suspicious. There was something else in the air, as if everyone had been told a story I hadn't heard yet. By noon, an internal email appeared in my inbox from an unfamiliar address. Subject: We care about your mental health. Inside was the latest company bulletin. Under the HR section, a brief paragraph stood out in a soothing tone. Some employees are experiencing high stress levels and signs of emotional imbalance following recent financial events. We encourage them to take time off and seek support if needed. Beneath the text was a photo of me, cropped from a seminar 3 months earlier, poorly lit, eyes unfocused, shoulders slumped. I read it again and again. My throat went dry. This was a more precise strike than any accusation. They were crafting a portrait of a woman unraveling, unstable, the kind of person who might have accidentally caused an error in the system. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in black suits wearing badges that read, NovaCore Internal Legal Counsel. I opened the door, keeping my voice steady. We've been authorized to deliver a document requiring your signature, the taller one said politely, though his tone was clipped. He handed me a thin folder. I skimmed it. A non-disclosure agreement. It stated that I was forbidden from discussing or disclosing any information related to the internal financial investigation. You just need to sign here, he said. This is for your protection, and to prevent any further damage to your reputation or the company's. I looked up. What if I don't? The other man shrugged. We're just doing our job, but if you want our advice, protect yourself. Mr. Vance is very invested in this matter. At the sound of that name, I gave a faint smile. I'm sure he is. I closed the door without signing. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. The caller ID read, Charles Vance. I answered. What do you want? His voice came low and calm, the kind of calm that belonged to someone who believed he controlled every piece on the board. I want to help you, Evelyn. You're under pressure, letting emotions take over. Don't destroy your career over a misunderstanding. I gave a quiet laugh. A misunderstanding worth $2.3 million. He paused. You don't understand. The world doesn't run on truth. It runs on belief. And I'm the one people believe. Belief doesn't replace data, I said. You think data will save you, but I can make every record vanish. I can make you vanish. and no one will remember you were ever balls. Here, I heard every word. His tone wasn't a threat, it was fact, stripped bare. I kept my voice even. I'm sure you'll try, but maybe you forgot. I'm very good at backups. I pressed record on my phone, and I'm not alone. Charles chuckled, slow and deliberate. You think the FBI will believe a woman on the verge of a breakdown? Maybe they'll believe this recording. A long silence followed. Then his voice dropped. You're making a mistake, Evelyn. I know. My mistake was ever trusting you. I hung up. My hands were trembling, but what I felt inside wasn't fear. It was released. That night, I called Jenna Morris, an old friend who worked in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We'd gone through audit training together. After I laid out everything, she was quiet for a long time. Evelyn, are you certain about what you're saying? If you are, this isn't an internal issue anymore. This is cross-border fraud. I have evidence, but not enough to make it undeniable. I need something he can't erase. Jenna's voice softened, turning serious. Listen to me. People like Vance don't make mistakes often. You have one chance. Make him reveal himself. A trap. Exactly. You need to make him touch the evidence. I understood immediately. If Charles accessed the file I created, the system would log his IP, timestamp, and credentials. That night, I built a folder titled Orion Review 2023 Final Audit Data. Inside, I placed a decoy file embedded with tracking code. If Charles opened it, the logs would record everything. When I finished, I sat in the dim light of the screen. I thought of my father, how he had once fought at a system far larger than himself. I understood now why it had broken him, but this time I wouldn't let history repeat. I saved the code, switched monitoring to active. Across the screen, a message appeared. Tracking, C. Vance. Status active. I whispered, steady and cold. Now, Charles, it's your turn to write your own confession. 24 hours had passed since I set the trap. The screen still glowed in the dark, the words, tracking C. Vance, status active blinking like a silent dare. Nothing happened. No alerts, no access logs, no trace of Charles Vance. Then, close to midnight on the second night, just as I began to think he was being cautious, the small icon in the corner of the screen flickered. A notification appeared, cold and sharp as a gunshot. Access detected. User C. Vance admin. Location NovaCore headquarters. 2:17 in the morning. I stopped breathing. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out every sound in the apartment. He had opened the file. In that moment, everything I had endured, the sleepless nights, the fear, the constant edge of collapse, came together in 1 second of clarity. I backed up the data, sent an encrypted copy to Aisha, and another to the hidden address only Jenna knew. Each step I took was precise, deliberate, as if I were disarming a bomb. A small ding, email sent. I leaned back, eyes fixed on the window. Outside, the Seattle skyline shimmered under the rain. I knew there was no turning back, but for the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe. The next morning, Jenna called. You did good, Evelyn, she said, her voice low but charged. We have enough to open a federal case. Do not tell anyone. Stay silent for 72 hours. I will reach out again. Am I safe? Not completely. You just touched a snake. And when a snake is hurt, it bites. I smiled faintly. I am used to poison. 3 hours later, the news exploded. I turned on the television and froze. My own face stared back at me. The reporter read slowly, every word like a knife. According to internal sources, employee Evelyn Ward is under investigation for unauthorized access to NovaCore's system and fabricating evidence to discredit company leadership. An old conference photo appeared, my eyes shadowed, mouth tight. Below it, a banner crawled across the screen. From senior auditor to internal hacker. My body went cold. Charles had struck first, and he had aimed exactly where I was weakest, my reputation. The phone would not stop ringing. Reporters, former coworkers, unknown numbers. I did not answer. When the doorbell rang, I knew what was coming next. 2 federal agents stood in the hall, black coats, FBI badges glinting under the light. Evelyn Ward. Yes, we have a warrant to seize your electronic devices for the ongoing investigation. I stood frozen as they gathered my laptop, phone, and hard drives. One of them, tall and thin, looked at me with quiet sympathy. You have the right to remain silent. But if you are innocent, let the law work. I gave a tired smile. That is exactly what I am trying to do. When they left, the apartment felt hollow. I sank to the floor, back against the wall, struggling to breathe. That night, just as I thought everything was over, my secondary phone, the one only 2 people knew about, vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Check she a. Orion archive drive. It is not just your data. I bolted up, went to the metal box in the cabinet, and pulled out the silver external drive. A scuffed label read Orion Archive, private copy. When I plugged it in, a hidden folder appeared. Cipher Edge, board access. Inside were dozens of audio files. I opened one. Charles's voice filled the room, unmistakable. We cannot keep pulling funds through that channel. Patrick, move it to Cipher Edge. The board already approved it. A second voice replied, deep, rough, familiar. As long as she does not find out, we need a scapegoat. I froze. That second voice belonged to Lawrence Kane, chairman of the board, the same man who once stood before the press declaring NovaCore transparent and fair. I stared at the screen. This was not just Charles Vance or Patrick Moore. It was a network, people at the top of NovaCore, laundering millions under the guise of corporate authority. I opened the window. Cold night air rushed in. Below, cars streamed through the rain, the city glowing as if nothing were wrong. But I knew better. Beneath the glass and steel was rot, and I was the first one who dared to knock on it. My phone rang again. Jenna. I am here, I said quickly. Evelyn, we have a problem. Someone inside leaked the existence of the investigation. Vance knows the FBI is watching. He is going to hit back. I know, I whispered, but I have something he cannot erase. I sent her the audio file, Cipher Edge. Board access through the encrypted channel. On the screen, the words appeared. Transfer complete. Thunder rolled outside. Lightning flashed, reflecting off the window and across my face. For the first time, I did not see myself trembling. Charles could buy silence, buy lawyers, buy headlines, but he could not buy back the timestamp of his own login, recorded in the FBI log, carved permanently into the system. I closed the laptop and poured a glass of red wine. My hands still trembled slightly, but my mind was calm. In the rain outside, I whispered, You want a media war, Charles? Then let the data speak for me. When I wrote the final line in my notebook, the pen shook, but the words were clear. Day 6. The trap is closed. He signed his own guilt. But I know, a snake rarely dies right away. It only goes quiet before it strikes again. I closed the notebook and looked toward the window, where the city lights flickered against the storm. The war was not over, but for the first time the balance had shifted to my side. Monday morning began with a strange kind of silence. No more threats, no more headlines, no new leaks. Seattle lay under a thin veil of mist, rain drifting down like smoke. I sat by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, watching drops slide down the glass. That quiet, too calm, too still, made me uneasy. Then my phone buzzed. An encrypted message from Jenna. Search warrant approved. Today. I set the cup down, heart pounding. After weeks of tension, the game was finally reaching its end. 9:07 in the morning. NovaCore headquarters felt unnaturally quiet. Outside, black, unmarked SUVs lined the street. Employees still came and went with their coffee cups, chatting softly until the revolving doors turned and 3 FBI agents stepped inside, jackets marked in gold letters. News traveled fast. I could imagine it, the glances, the whispers, the hurried footsteps echoing down the 27th floor. And then the glass doors opened again. Charles Vance entered, calm as if he had been expecting it. I watched through the internal camera feed Riley had sent me. Charles wore a gray suit, a dark tie, and a look free of fear. He smiled, shook hands with the agents like a gracious host. One of them unfolded a warrant. "We need to inspect all financial systems and electronic devices, Mr. Vance." Charles skimmed the paper, arching a brow. "I've always supported transparency. Be my guest." At that same moment, another message from Jenna. "Evelyn, do not go to headquarters. Let them handle it." I replied simply, "I'm not running." I put on my coat and stepped into the cold air. Each step down the street felt like a countdown. The 27th floor. When the elevator doors opened, every eye turned to me. Aisha stood at the end of the hall, pale. "Evelyn, you shouldn't be here." "I've been here since the beginning," I said. "I'm ending it here too." The main conference room was packed. Agents were copying drives, sealing phones, and scanning devices. Charles sat at the head of the table, fingers clasped, eyes calm as I walked in. "Ah," he said, "our hero has arrived." I stood across from him, silent. An agent placed a file in front of him, containing printed logs from the security system. User C. Vance admin. Access time 2:17 in the morning. File Orion Review 2023. Final audit data. I looked at him. "That was when you opened the file, Charles." He smiled faintly. "You forget I'm the chief executive officer. I have access to everything. One log means nothing." I turned to the agent. "Show the second part." The agent nodded and pulled up the extended record on the projector. The screen displayed the source IP, device code, and, most importantly, the automatic digital signature attached to every high-level security access. That signature couldn't be forged. Across the screen, the words appeared, "Approved by C. Vance." For the first time, Charles's face shifted. A flicker, barely there, but I saw it. Patrick Moore, the chief financial officer, stood behind him, pale as paper. When the agents displayed the cipher-edged transactions, his hands shook. "Mr. Moore," one of them said, "do you confirm these transfers?" Patrick opened his mouth, but Charles spoke first. "My employees have been under stress. Mistakes happen." Patrick turned to him, fear and exhaustion in his eyes. Then he said quietly, voice cracking, "No, not a mistake. He ordered it." The room went still. "Patrick," Charles warned, "be careful with your words." But Patrick lowered his head, the confession spilling out. "Cipher Edge is a shell company. I transferred the money overseas under instructions from Charles and Lawrence Kane, the chairman of the board. They said they'd return it next quarter to balance the books. I just followed orders." The only sound was the click of an agent's pen against the table. Charles laughed once, short and dry. "You really think you've won, Evelyn? No one will believe a disgraced employee over a chief executive officer who saved this company a dozen times." I answered, steady, each word landing hard. "I don't need them to believe me, Charles. I just need them to believe the data." An agent stepped forward. "Charles Vance, you're under arrest for suspected financial fraud, international money laundering, and obstruction of a federal investigation." The handcuffs snapped shut, the metallic sound cutting through the still air. Charles turned toward me as they led him away. "You'll regret this," he said quietly, voice calm but chilling. "They'll use you and throw you away like they did me. There's no place for honesty in this world." I said nothing, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Not the fear of losing power, but the fear of realizing his power was no longer absolute. 2 hours later, NovaCore's headquarters became a battlefield of information. Reporters crowded the gates. Employees were questioned one by one. Riley sent me a message. "Orion is back. They said you'll be invited to return." I replied, short and simple. "Not yet. I'm not finished." That afternoon, I was called into a temporary meeting room where several agents waited. Jenna was there, serious but warm. "You did well," she said. "Vance will be indicted, but there's something you need to know." I looked up. "What is it?" "In the system logs, we found another ID, admin 0. It accessed Vance's account before he approved the transfers. The IP leads to the chairman's office, Lawrence Kane." I stayed quiet for a few seconds. "So he wasn't alone." Jenna nodded. You'll be the key witness. But be careful, the board isn't finished playing. I nodded, staring out the window where rain streaked the glass like fading records that refused to be erased. In the distance, city lights gleamed against the steel skyline. NovaCore still shone bright, as if nothing had happened. That night, I returned to my apartment. The silence was so complete I could hear the clock ticking. I laid my coat on the chair and walked to the window. Across the street, NovaCore's tower glowed in the rain, its logo burning bright like a warning that in this world, light is often just a thin coat of paint over the dark. I opened my notebook and wrote, Day 7. He's fallen. But the cracks run deeper than I imagined. Justice has arrived, but that doesn't mean victory. In every system, when one man falls, another always steps in to take his place. I closed the notebook and exhaled slowly. I had reclaimed the truth, but lost the belief that it could ever truly protect me. Outside, the streetlights flickered through the rain. A part of me knew this wasn't the end. It was only the moment the first curtain came down. 3 weeks after Charles Vance was arrested, NovaCore looked like a company that had survived a storm without understanding where it came from. The hallways that once smelled of power were now covered with notices reading under restructuring, under process review, and positions temporarily suspended. I walked through the doors that had once held my fear captive, for the first time without a guard stopping me. But instead of relief, I felt hollow. The media called me the whistleblower of the year. Business magazines labeled me the woman who broke NovaCore's wall of silence. Those headlines echoed across the internet, but to me, they were empty noise. No one talked about the fear, the isolation, or the nights I left the lights on because I was afraid of hearing a car stop outside. In a world that worships winners, no one speaks of the cost of becoming one. I was invited to a meeting in the temporary boardroom on the 29th floor. The board had shrunk to 4 people, 3 old members, and 1 new addition from an external investment group. In the center sat Diane Mercer, silver hair, sharp eyes, the veteran now serving as interim chair after Lawrence Kane had taken an indefinite leave for health reasons. Diane gestured for me to sit, her smile polite but cold. First, she said, on behalf of the board, thank you, Evelyn. What you did saved this company from collapse. We owe you a great deal. I nodded slightly. Thank you. But I'm not here for gratitude. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. I'm here to talk about conditions, I continued. If NovaCore wants to rebuild, it has to start with transparency. The air in the room shifted. I caught the quick glances exchanged around the table. The gray-haired man on her right, the new internal counsel, folded his hands. What do you propose? Diane asked evenly. I opened my notebook and read slowly. 1. The company must publicly clear the entire Orion team, release an official statement, and restore all rights and reputations. That will be considered, the lawyer began, but I cut him off. No consideration. Implementation. My voice wasn't loud, but the room fell silent. 2. I want the audit and finance divisions merged into a single entity, the Department of Risk and Compliance Control. It will report directly to the board, not through the chief executive officer. One member frowned. You're asking for director-level authority. I'm asking for the truth to have its own voice, I said. Diane pressed her lips together, but didn't object. 3. I will take charge of that department. But I won't sign any non-disclosure agreement. If this company repeats its mistakes, I will not stay silent. The air thickened. The lawyer looked at Diane, waiting for direction. She leaned back, studying me, her eyes sharp as glass. You don't trust us. I trust data, I said slowly. But data doesn't protect itself. Someone has to. I'm choosing to be that person. A long pause. Then Diane gave a small, amused smile, half respect, half calculation. You've got nerve, Evelyn. I understand now why Charles lost to you. She turned to the others. I agree. We need someone like her in the new structure. Any objections? None. I nodded and signed the temporary appointment agreement. When I stepped out, sunlight spilled across the marble floor, cold and blinding. I realized I had just signed a contract not only with the company, but with my own fear. The weeks that followed were heavy with contradiction. The press moved on, other headlines took over, and NovaCore launched its campaign called Rebuilding Trust. I was given my own office, the same one Charles Vance once occupied, facing the bay. The first time I entered, dust still clung to the desk, and the chair held the imprint where he used to sit. I cleaned it, then placed a small plant there, a gift from Lucia, the office assistant. She said, "This one survives easily, just like you." I smiled. The smile didn't last. Every evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed by the window, watching the city dissolve into fog. Sometimes I wondered if I was becoming what I once despised, a piece of the system I fought to break. One night, Jenna called. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I'm not sure. I won, but it doesn't feel like a victory." "I know," Jenna said softly. "Because truth is never a full victory. It's just the first step. I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that if I stay too long, I'll learn to be silent like them." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Then don't. Remember why you started. Don't let your justice become the thing you had to fight." After the call, I sat in the dark, listening to the rain tapping against the glass. I opened my notebook and wrote a new line. Day 30. I am inside the system I once tore down. Justice is not a destination. It's something you rebuild every day. The next morning, as I walked through the building, I heard whispers in the hall. A few people stopped talking when I passed. I knew what I was to them. Not a victim, not a hero, but an observer. And in this world, observers make everyone uneasy. When I entered my office, a white envelope sat on the desk with no name. Inside was a small note written neatly by hand. "They're watching you. Be careful what you sign. No return address, no mark, just the faint scent of fresh ink." I looked around. The room was empty, still. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had ever happened. I folded the note and placed it inside my notebook, beside my father's old words. "Truth doesn't need defenders. Only someone willing to hold it." I whispered softly, as if to him, "I'm still holding it, Dad." Morning light from Seattle poured through the glass, washing over my face. No more panic, no more shaking, only stillness. One chapter had closed, but I knew the story wasn't done. Darkness never disappears just because we shine a light. It only retreats, waiting for its next chance to return. And I, once accused, once afraid, am now the one guarding that light. 3 months after I returned to NovaCore, everything seemed fine. On paper, the company had restored its reputation. The media celebrated it as a rebirth after the greatest scandal in its history. The new board held press conferences. Diane Mercer appeared on television with her polished smile, promising a new era of transparency and integrity. I sat in my office on the 27th floor, watching rain blur the lights of Seattle below. People still hurried through the streets, cars sliding by as if the world had never fractured. Sometimes I wondered if anyone truly cared about justice, or if they only cared that the story had the right kind of ending. My new job felt like walking a tightrope. Every day I reviewed reports, signed approvals, and monitored the new financial flow. Everything was clean, too clean. No anomalies, no unauthorized logins, no strange IPs. But that kind of perfection was its own warning. One evening, as I was about to leave, the screen flickered. A system message appeared. Request access, admin 0. I froze. Admin 0, the same identifier Jenna once told me about, the one that had accessed Charles's account before his signature appeared. I pulled up the logs, but before I could trace it, the entry vanished. Access terminated. User admin 0, trace removed. No footprint, no address, no timestamp. A ghost in the system. I shut the computer and walked out. The sound of my own footsteps felt too loud. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of a security camera at the end of the hallway turning toward me. That night, the rain came hard. Streetlights smeared across the window like circuits glowing under glass. I dropped my bag on the table, ready to make coffee, when I saw it, a black envelope on the sofa. The lock on my door was untouched. On the front, one line of writing. For Evelyn Ward, from Internal Compliance. I tore it open. Inside was a photograph, me, sitting in my office at night, the glow of the monitor lighting my face. The angle wasn't from a company camera, it was taken from outside the building, through the glass. A silver USB drive rested beneath the photo, small and cold. I plugged it in. One file appeared. Cipher Edge Archive 2. Inside were dozens of encrypted emails. The sender's address, lmercer@novacore.com. I read slowly. Lawrence, move the remaining funds to the Phoenix account. Don't use the old channel. Diane is ready. We need a new face. Someone the public trusts. Someone like Ward. Let her think she's in control. The blood drained from my face. They had never stopped. Charles was just a pawn. The so-called system purge had only been a rebranding. Diane and Lawrence, the old and new chairs, were still running the same network. And I, the woman who believed she'd exposed the darkness, had only cleaned the stage for them. I closed the file, leaning back in the chair. The rain against the window sounded like a slow, deliberate knock. 3 days later, I met Jenna at a cafe near Lake Union. She took one look at me and knew. What did you find? She asked. I slid the USB across the table. Phoenix Fund. A new money trail. It starts from NovaCore accounts and passes through 3 shell layers. Signed by Diane Mercer. Jenna's face hardened. Are you sure I have the logs? If I'm right, this isn't just NovaCore anymore. It's a corporate network washing money across borders. She lowered her voice. Evelyn, if that's true, you're going up against people even the Bureau asked permission to touch. I nodded. I know, but I can't stop. She sighed. I can protect you. Once more. After that, you disappear. They won't let you survive twice. I don't need protection, I said quietly. I need the truth to be known. She looked at me for a long time. You really don't know fear, do you? I've already lost everything, I said. What's left to fear? That night, I went back to headquarters. The building was nearly empty, lit only by the faint glow of the lobby lights. The air smelled of dust and glass cleaner. I unlocked my office, turned on the monitor. Wind from the window stirred the papers on the desk. I created a new report, Operation Phoenix, internal summary. I attached every log, every email, every record of transfer. Then I sent it to 5 addresses, Jenna, 2 investigative journalists, and 2 encrypted data channels I had once used as an independent auditor. The send button glowed. For a moment, I hesitated. If I clicked it, there would be no going back. Then I remembered my father's last words. Truth doesn't need defenders, only someone willing to hold it. I pressed send. Transfer complete. I stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer through the rain. Across the street, one window was lit. A figure stood there, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. Then my phone buzzed. An anonymous message? You exposed one snake, but the nest is still alive. I stared at the words for a long time. The nest. I understood. Charles's case had only scratched the surface. Beneath it lay an entire structure feeding on deceit. I opened my notebook and wrote, Day 90. Everything begins again in darkness. But I'm still here. If justice is light, then I'll be the one who keeps it burning, even in a single room. I closed the notebook, placed it in my bag, and walked out. Down the hallway, the motion lights shut off one by one with each step I took. The brightness retreated behind me, until there was only me and my shadow. At the elevator, I turned to look back at the 27th floor. NovaCore still glowed, but I knew that light didn't belong to justice. It belonged to those who knew how to adjust brightness to hide the cracks. The elevator doors slid shut, reflecting my face in dull steel. No fear, no illusion. Only the eyes of someone who knows that truth, no matter how painful, are still worth keeping. As the elevator descended, I whispered to myself, the game isn't over, but this time I'll decide when it begins again.